Wow. That's kind of the first reaction. And this is the morning after the Pittsburgh Penguins eliminated after a 6-game first round series loss to the New York Islanders. Another series loss to the New York Islanders. They actually closed their barn as they're able to continue on in the postseason. So that barn not closed yet there in the Nassau Coliseum. The Islanders winning 5-3 in game 6 of the series. Tristan Jarry not good enough again. The Stars do pick it up a little bit in game 6, but the Penguins just not good enough overall. The Islanders advance. The Penguins go home. A lot of questions, a lot of reaction, a lot of backlash, maybe an end of an era as much of an end of a season, a division champion that loses in the first round, another early first round exit for the Penguins. We're going to talk all of that. We're also going to talk about some other reason to be a hockey fan in Pittsburgh and be down. Some negative news around the Pittsburgh hockey college scene here that broke the same day the Penguins were eliminated. That's all going to be here on Mic'd Up on Pittsburgh Sports Live, at Pittsburgh Sports Now, and all throughout the Now family of networks. I'm Mike Asti. I'm joined by Mike Vukovcan, and of course, Mic'd Up is presented by Martin Lawn Services at 412-849-5894. And Mike, it rained yesterday, so I guess it rained and then it really poured for the Pittsburgh Penguins, even though they weren't in Pittsburgh. They lose game 6. I thought they'd take care of it earlier. I thought they'd at least win in game 7 once it even got bad and they faced elimination. We talked about it the other day, and they end up losing. They prove a lot of people wrong. They lose another early exit. They lose to the Islanders. They can't get over Trotz. They can't get over that style. And Tristan Jarry just was not good at all in game 6. What's your initial reaction before we kind of unpack all of this?
It's going to be a very busy.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's going to be a very busy summer for Burke and Hextall, with input from Lemieux and Burkle.
Right.
There's so many ways to go with this, Mike. We could talk until this evening about.
We could, and we'll probably be able to talk all off season on this.
But I'm going to get to the point that I was making on Twitter last night, in that I think Penguin fans and the Penguins management have to get past. There's no way to get past how putrid Jarry was in net. There's no going. Trying to get around that, or
no.
However, they need to look at this and don't look at this as a one-year failure. This is Tristan Jarry hasn't been in net for the Penguins for 4 years. This is 4 straight playoff losses. They have 3 wins in their last 16 games.
That's bad.
This is a long-term problem, and after that game, the only way to fix it is to blow it up. There's no I'm not saying you trade everybody, but the only thing I will say is that the only guy that should be confident about living in Pittsburgh next winter is Sidney Crosby. Right. I think everybody else is fair game to be had. I think Mike Sullivan, although I wouldn't do it, I would examine what he's doing, because he obviously hasn't been good enough.
He's proven some stubbornness, and we'll get there in a moment, too.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I don't think they would pull the trigger on that, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's at least a meeting, because I will tell you, I'm not at all surprised he rode with Jarry to this point. DeSmith being hurt, you didn't have any other option. You're not going to go with somebody incredibly inexperienced, even though Jarry was entering the playoffs. But once you get to the game 6, you're facing elimination, you're going to stick with Jarry. But Jarry didn't have it in game 6. That was clear early. To stick with him pretty much all the way through, came off stubbornness, and he didn't even tweak the lines at all. He basically rode the same team all the way through a series in which they lose 4 games out of the 6.
This team just isn't good enough. Mike.
His style doesn't also work with what Hextall and Burke normally put out for their teams.
I think maybe what happened was the expectations on this team maybe got unfairly or unfairly got raised because of how they finished the regular season. There was nobody in.
Was that just taking advantage of an easy schedule? They played the Sabres seemingly every
other
day.
I don't have the answer to that. I just know that at the beginning of the season, there weren't very many people
Right.
in the NHL talking about the Penguins being a Stanley Cup contender.
Yeah, they started off sluggish. Yep.
When Jim Rutherford quit, this was a bad team record-wise.
Right.
So, and then they went on a run, and that raised everyone's expectations. And unfortunately, when that happens, if you don't get out of the first round of the playoffs when you win your division, a lot of things are going to be called into question, and that's surely going to be the case this offseason.
Yeah, and the Penguins have the more talented team. They're not built perfectly. They're not built even in the style of the management right now, as the team is not really constructed in what Ron Burke or what Ron Hextall and Brian Burke would want to put forth. However, they have the talent. Crosby had an MVP caliber year. Yes, Malkin missed a lot of time, but they had more talent than the Islanders, and the Islanders used multiple goaltenders in this series as well. They used an inexperienced rookie goaltender in most of the series to lead them to a victory. Varlamov only played in a couple games, and they weren't their best games, and he was the veteran that had been there in the regular season. So they were able to do it with a young gun without experience, and they did it with a less talented team, but they played a style that fits their head coach and just works against the Penguins. I think what's clear now, and this is why they've lost early for several years in a row, no matter who's been in net. And Jari's not good enough. His days in Pittsburgh got to be numbered. He can't be the guy, and if he's still around, he certainly can't guarantee to be the starter. That definitely is in question. But the Penguins cannot just use their talent and dominate teams any longer like they were for a while. They don't have the speed. They're a much slower team. They don't really have a style that maybe is conducive for a playoff run. When these stars are now older, they can't run with you. They can't. You're not seeing Crosby and Malkin burning for breakaways every other play like you saw in 16 and 17 when they really won, mostly because of offense, despite some solid games from Fleury and Murray, of course. But the Penguins bounced Murray because they thought he was the problem to have these early exits, and he didn't play well in the playoffs. The same thing occurs with him out of town. So, yes, again, I do think the Penguins, despite how things went, I do think the Penguins would have won this series somehow if Jari played anywhere near better, because they were in every game, and I think they would have at least went to 7, and then I think at 7 at home they would have won it if they would have got better goaltending. But the excuses can't be there. They were a division champion with more talent. They didn't get it done again. We've talked before about Malkin being a player that could be moved just because that would really signal the end of an era. It maybe should have happened years ago. The value wouldn't be there now, but that would save tons of cap space. And Zucker actually performed in the series, and he's the one player that many believe they're not going to protect and going to leave open in the expansion draft. But it just weren't good enough. They got secondary scoring occasionally. They didn't get enough. They did not. Two things they didn't have happen why they lost the series. They didn't get good enough goaltending, and they didn't get enough from their stars. Crosby one goal all the way through. Malkin turned it on late, but not enough. Gensel turned it on in Game 6, but not prior to that. Zucker had a couple goals. Zucker scored more than Gensel and Crosby and Malkin, and he's the guy that everyone trashes. So,
check out Crosby's plus-minus the last few playoff series.
Right.
Sorry, it's not.
Yeah, the top line allowed 3 goals in Game 6.
Right, and it's not a good thing, and it's a telling thing when your best player,
right,
your best forward on the team is Jeff Carter, a guy
he was
a guy that they picked up at the end of the year that was being talked about retiring.
And now that trade sucks, honestly.
Yeah, so they lose. It's bad, and here's the bottom line, Mike. This is a team. And I'll keep repeating this because this isn't going to get mentioned enough in the next weeks and days
right.
ahead. The whole storyline will be Jari. Numbers don't lie. In the 16 games they've lost, we've talked about the last 4 playoff series,
right.
16 games. They gave up 53 goals in 16 games. Way too many. However, they only scored in 16 games 34 goals. That's
with
2
that
goals a game.
with that firepower in this era.
2 goals a game. I'm sorry. I don't care if
Yeah.
you have Patrick Waugh in net.
Yeah.
You're asking way too much of your goalie when you're only averaging 2 goals a game. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
It's never. When you lose most of the time, this series, no question, Tristan Jarry is the reason why they lost this series. However, I'm going 4 years. Their team as a whole has not been good enough. Crosby has not been good enough for the attention he gets in this town. Great regular season player. He's disappeared in the playoffs the last couple of years. Same with all the cast of characters he has with him. The
Yeah.
first 2, you're just not good enough.
And not recently. I mean, and you can't. I don't think you can say that career-wise. He's won two
not
Conn
career.
Smythe, but recently, for sure. Yeah, recently has not been what it was. He has proven to be a great postseason player. Same with Malkin. Crosby's won 2 Conn Smythe. Malkin won in 2009. Letang, Gensel from the start of his career was great in the postseason. They have been great playoff players over the overall totality of their career, but not in the last few years. The window was still supposed to be open. Sullivan was still there. It does appear that there needs to be some adjustment in terms of his style. There needs to be a lot more from the Stars. If they can't give you more, then you do need to maybe bounce one and trade Malkin and move on and totally change the era. I don't think that's going to occur, but I didn't think they were going to lose in the first round either. The one constant we know is Tristan Jarry. I cannot imagine he is back, and he probably was going to be back in any other circumstance if they even would have got out of the round, because it's certainly up in the air and where you go from there. Do you have confidence in DeSmith, or do you need to go get someone else? But if you do that, you're going to need cap space, and unless they move Malkin, they're not going to have it. So it's tough days for the Penguins right now, and Burke and Hextall have their work cut out for them, and maybe more than they would have thought, because when they took over the job, that was a non-playoff team that they thought they were just going to be able to ship everyone off and do a rebuild with the exception of a few guys, and they have more to deal with now with a division champion that plays so well down the stretch and then turns another playoff collapse. This is different management, different goaltender, same Stars, same results. So
I'll say I'm gonna give my first prediction. The more I think about this as we talk.
Yeah, off-season prediction here is we're moving
on. I'm gonna say that
this show.
Obviously I'm not tied in with the Penguins or
right.
I will say this: the more I think about this, and knowing the reputation of the way it's done in the NHL and the new men in charge, the new sheriffs in town.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be shocked, and I would be put it this way: I would be very surprised if Mike Sullivan returns next year. I just think that Burke's in charge of this team.
Yeah, he didn't hire Sullivan.
He didn't hire Mike Sullivan. Mario Lemieux for the 4th straight year, and Ron Burkle are not collecting into the second round for playoff revenue. They need that money,
right?
And it could be looked at as a new start for this Penguin organization. Not that Mike Sullivan is a bad coach, but they might need a different voice, a new personality to lead this new group of players, because whether it's fair or not, he has not found a way to adjust in the playoffs for 4 straight years, getting bounced to a bad Montreal team last year, which was embarrassing. This year, I wouldn't say it was embarrassing, but it was bad. And then the year before, it just can't happen when you're behind the bench, you're in charge. No matter how well you do in the regular season, as we continue to repeat, the Penguins and the Steelers are judged by the playoffs, and it's not good enough.
It's not been good enough, and the Penguins have more talent. So when you have more talent, especially when you're a division champion, it needs to be good enough to at least get through a round of the playoffs. They didn't have the goaltending. Jarry is at fault for the series. He's going to be gone. But again, that's not an excuse overall. They could have done more. They could have been better. Many of the Stars needed to be better, especially when you have a goaltender faltering. And while I wouldn't be shocked if that would occur, I do think he's probably going to be back. But I wouldn't be shocked because, again, Hextall, Burke, they didn't hire him. In the NHL, It's very rare to see coaches here even this long. Quinville eventually had to part ways with the Blackhawks after 3 cups. Sullivan's won 2. It wouldn't shock me. Scotty Bowman had to go team to team to win all of his. It happens in hockey. There are times where a coach is there for 1 year and had success. Look at Vegas with Fleury. They were in the final in their inception season, inaugural season of the franchise. They had 1 playoff failure the next year with an early exit, and they're firing a coach. So that's what happens in the NHL. Mike Babcock. He won a cup and went to 2 finals with the Red Wings, built them up again from where they were. They had a dip, and then he built them back into a power. And yes, they faltered, but the players got older. Not really all his fault, but he ended up having to leave there. And eventually his voice was just tuned out there despite all the success in Detroit. So, yeah, it can happen. It absolutely can. I'll make my prediction of if Mike Sullivan is fired, he's the next head coach with the New York Rangers. That'll be a team that would love the cachet. They would see 2 rings. They would go get him. They would pay him. The media market would like him. I think he would also like to salivate and go at the Penguins because he probably would leave bitter. I think if he leaves, it's not going to be the friendliest exit. He'll probably be a little upset and feel like he's scapegoated. But eventually, they'll still celebrate the 2 cups. He was a great coach, but I think the era eventually does have to end in some way or another. If it's not him, it's Malkin somehow.
Here's a good. Just throwing this out there. I hate to do this because Mike Sullivan is still employed, but a good fit for Brian Burke style hockey. And I know he's been buddies with Lemieux over the years, which always helps.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Rick Tocchet.
For sure. I think that would be the first call.
Yeah.
It would fit in.
He's a hero here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
The way he plays, that's the style of hockey that Brian Burke and I'm not sure. I guess Ron Hextall too. Who knows? Throw it out, but it should be an interesting offseason for Pittsburgh hockey now. Dan Kongursky and the crew there. I had a question for you, Mike.
Sure.
Which would you say, because I threw this on Twitter last night and I'm getting a bunch of, it's 50-50 split.
Okay.
Which 2 teams would you say have failed more in the playoffs, the Penguins' recent run or the Steelers?
Well, the Steelers weren't in the playoffs for a couple of those years. I'm going to lean Steelers just because hockey is such a crapshoot. A hot goaltender can steal a series for you. Yes, they underachieve with tons of talent, and yes, the goaltending wasn't enough, but it's been longer for the Steelers to win. 3 playoff victories in a decade is worse than 3 in a few years, even though there's series in the National Hockey League. And you could certainly argue that when the Steelers had Ben, AB, Le'Veon Bell, who was still in his prime at that point, that's 3 stars. That's the equivalent at the very minimum of Crosby, Malkin, and Kessel, for example, when there was a 3rd guy there and they did win 2. And the Steelers didn't get a ring out of that or really get deep out of that, a couple AFC title appearances. I would go Steelers. They both have been disappointing, of course, since really 2018. The Penguins have those recent back-to-back, though, which certainly gives them that advantage. The Steelers haven't won a Super Bowl in over a decade now or even appeared in one. But it's been – and also the Steelers have missed the postseason in there, where the Penguins cannot say that. So I think it's still Steelers. I also will say, because I saw this on Twitter to segue, that I do feel the Steelers' first-round playoff loss to the Browns is more embarrassing than this by the Penguins. Yeah. Yes, this is really, really bad, and yes, they're both division champions, and the Steelers were playing poor at the end of the season, whereas the Penguins were playing well. But that's your rival. That's a team that hadn't been there before, that has less experience. The Islanders at least had been there a few years in a row, and they didn't even compete in the game. They were done from Jump Street, where at least this went 6 games in the series. So that was worse for me, but I think the Steelers have been more disappointing in the last decade. They literally have won less with just as much talent. As we move on here, of course, mic'd up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, presented by Martin Lawn Services. We're going to be talking Penguins, I have a feeling, a lot more this offseason because a lot's going to happen. A lot more conversation's going to happen, and there will be changes, goalie at the very, very minimum. But the day wasn't just dark in Pittsburgh, in the hockey community, because the Penguins lost in the postseason. Robert Morris University decides to give the axe to their hockey program. The men's and women's hockey programs, Division I hockey programs, they're gone. And this is a hockey program that had been around a while. Derek Shuley had been around a while as head coach of the men's team. There had been success. They hosted a tournament at PPG Paints Arena twice. That's a big deal. You're talking about NCAA tournament appearances. That program was built up. There was a level of success there. There was a level of respect there, and certainly helped the city even. And due to money, due to different issues, we haven't really been able to hear the whole story yet. We're still kind of waiting for that potential full answer to be given outside of just a little statement they unveiled. But those programs are gone now. They made cuts, and it's the hockey program. It's not football. It's not basketball, even though they've been less successful. It's hockey. Mike, obviously this has been the talk of the town, even while the Penguins losing kind of maybe overshadows it for an hour or so, but it's back to being a conversation again. What are your thoughts, and how egregious is this? Because for me, that's the one program that could have sustained success. It could have sustained success more than football or basketball. I get there, the money sports, but this is a small school. A former employer of mine, actually, I started my professional media career kind of there after graduating from college, calling some games there for RMU. So know a lot of people there. Marty Gillespie, great guy, but it sucks. Everyone I see that is an RMU alum or cares about the program is, I've heard the words. I've seen the posts. I'm embarrassed of my degree. I hate the program now. I mean, that's, a lot, but to axe successful programs and to get rid of hockey altogether at a small school just sucks.
Yeah. I'm an RMU grad, so I will throw that out there. I'm not embarrassed. I won't go that far.
The degree's still taking you far.
Yeah. But I will say that I want to be fair about things, because obviously this is it's
a money decision.
Has to be a money situation. For what I've heard over the last few years, the place isn't, the enrollment isn't what it was. The money isn't there. And when you're running a sport like hockey that is very
take money,
very expensive to run, and you're not getting anything with ticket revenue or anything, that makes it difficult. And I'm not justifying it. I say the same thing for football. I think an argument can be made that football should have been dropped over Robert Morris before you think about dropping the hockey program.
I think so. And
they've been more successful. And football, I don't know what the future is there. We'll see what it, we'll see how much Bernard Clark can take that program. My big criticism, and that's why I don't want to talk too much about it as far as criticizing them. There will be a time for that.
Right.
If I just don't think you can do a major move like that. You're not dropping, nothing against badminton or anything, but you're not dropping badminton from your program. There needed to be a press conference.
Right. Yes.
You can't drop a program through an email. And Chris Howard, Chris King, everyone needed to call a press conference, have everyone there, and they needed to face the music and answer questions, because there's tons of questions. You just can't. It's a bad look. If you weren't ready to answer the questions, you don't drop the program yet. I just think the way it was handled, and to this Chris King, and I don't know what this says. I haven't read a comment from the athletic director. I don't think that's something that he wants on his resume. I know this couldn't have been easy for him, being an RMU guy.
I'm sure it was not an easy decision, to be fair.
Chris Howard is the only one that has spoken on this issue so far. So they need to get out and do it. And I felt bad for the whole program. They woke up this morning, nobody within the program, none of the players knew this was happening. Yeah. All of a sudden in the morning, Alan Saunders has done a great job covering that story. They all of a sudden get an email. They find out right before it happens that you guys how about the people that are on scholarship?
Yeah. I mean, if you're there to play hockey, what are you doing?
Right, exactly. Those especially the women. There's only so many women's programs.
Yeah, and you're not from Pittsburgh. You're very, very unlikely to be from Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So what are they going to do? I know the coaching staff is talented, so they'll be able to find a job. But that really sucks for for those kids that are on scholarship. What do they do? But this story hasn't gone away, and I'm sure at some point today, I would at least hope that RMU addresses this situation, gets in front of the camera, holds a press conference, and starts answering some tough questions, because there's a lot of them as far as the justification for for getting rid of a program that is not it's not arguably has been Robert Morris's most successful athletic program over the last handful of years.
And I know it could not have been an easy decision. And I know that hockey does cost more, which is why it's harder to get young kids to play the sport in some respects. It certainly costs more to get equipment, to get sticks, to get helmets, to get ready, to be able to have ice time than it does to pick up a basketball and find a little circle and shoot some hoops over a rinky-dink hoop in a park somewhere. I mean, that doesn't cost hardly anything. So I get it in that respect. And I get the money that it takes to put it into a program, and that being a small school. And I'm sure enrollment's been down, because enrollment's been down at a lot of schools recently. It's even going to go further down after the pandemic, and that's a small institution. That's not a major university. They do need that revenue. But I hope they were also considering the fact that having those tournaments at PPG Paints, having the success of the program, having a head coach that's been there a long time, that is known across the country to have success, that's all good for the program and makes money for you indirectly in other ways in terms of promoting the program, having Boston College come down to play you at PPG Paints for that tournament. It doesn't matter whether you win or not. RMU is hosting the tournament, and that's national coverage. And those things are not going to occur with the basketball program that at best is going to make one NCAA tournament every 7 or 8 probably decade and lose right away, maybe win the conference occasionally. The women's program has actually been more successful in that regard, really, in terms of winning the conference. The football program hasn't been good. Honestly, to be fair, they should have asked the football program first in terms of who has been successful, who has not, and money, and still takes money to run a football program. It does lead you to believe, and this is a fair criticism, that a lot of the people in charge, King, Howard, for example, are big football guys. They always talk about that. Their resumes are filled with football. Did they make a fair decision, or did they make a decision with their heart because they don't like hockey as much as football? And if the decision came down to football or hockey, they pick their heart more than maybe what should have occurred in terms of success. Those are the questions they need to answer. And if they don't have a press conference, it is fair to speculate this wasn't maybe the best of decisions, but it really does hurt the overall athletic program. Maybe they had to do it, but it's not a good day for the program. It's not good for the school. I don't think anyone could argue that. I'm sure they wouldn't argue that, but they didn't handle it well. And out of all coaches to handle better, this was not the one to send an email and treat the players like that. It just wasn't handled well. Again, it's a dark day, more so than the Penguins losing the playoffs. This is long-term ramifications. And you talk about Hockey Town, Pittsburgh calling themselves Hockey Town. That's really just the success of the Penguins. Now there's not a major hockey D1 program in the freaking city.
I was just gonna. That's my next point. Was going to be with
it's not going to do it. WVU regionally is not doing it.
With all the rinks that are in the area and the the boom of the hockey rinks around Western Pennsylvania are filled, and the Penguins, and now you don't have
high school
any of the colleges in town. There's no D1 program. That was Robert Morris's claim to fame, is that they were able to offer that, and not only offer that, as you mentioned, let's be realistic, when Robert Morris, as you said, when Robert Morris makes the NCAA tournaments, they're going to last a game or two, and then they're going to bow out. At least when the hockey programs made the NCAA tournament, they went into those playoffs with a chance to advance and to make some noise. But the problem is on the other side, and it's a money business. Everything in this world, it's about the money, and that program in particular if you looked at the financials, I haven't, but
No, they couldn't have been good.
It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure it out that money can't. It was probably hemorrhaging money.
Yeah,
And
they wouldn't have done it just to be jerks. I mean, if it was
right.
making money or even if it was breaking even, they would have let it roll with how successful they've been.
The
Clearly,
bottom line business, and
it was not making money.
It tells me that the overall health of Robert Morris as a university, not athletics, as a university, is not very good.
Yeah, that would absolutely give me pause if I were a parent. Even if I didn't care about hockey, I would say you're cutting your most successful athletic program. That's not good. That would maybe even give me pause if I'm an athlete going to play basketball or football and say, clearly this athletic program overall is not thriving right now. It's not a good day. I don't think it's a good day for any RMU athlete, for anyone at the school, for any student, anyone in administration, past, present, future, really, depending on what goes on. Not a good day. A dark day for Pittsburgh hockey just last night, and then that has to be the looming segment over the show. Doom and gloom here on this edition of the morning show. Penguins eliminated and RMU Nixon hockey altogether. Maybe we'll have more positivity for you on future programs. That'll be it for this one here. Mic'd Up is presented by Martin Lawn Services, of course. Call Doug Martin at 412-849-5894. We had to keep it real, and it was really, really bad right now for Pittsburgh in many respects, certainly in the hockey community. Check out the sites for all the coverage. More on that RMU story if we ever can get a press conference. That certainly will be what to watch out for throughout the rest of your day.